Hello, 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 everybody. Good night, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Greetings and salutations and blessings to you. My name is Reverend Phoenix Coffin Williams. I am the first priest of the Corellian Nativist tradition. I am the successor to the Most Reverend Don Lewis. He is the first priest before me. And I am here to present to y'all on radical theologies and how they can be applied during our current climate. So if you are here at this presentation, you are here to learn how to utilize spirituality and religion to orient it towards social justice, towards social change, and for the affirmation of all of God and Goddess's creations. That's what we're here to discuss. The specific theology that I am going to discuss today was a part of my dissertation for my PhD in pastoral counseling and pastoral psychology. And so what we are going to be going through is some of the observations, some of the research, and some of the insights that I've been able to glean while going through this process of attempting to attain my doctoral degree. So full disclosure, I have not actually finished the dissertation. I have not actually completed the degree, but I am in the process of doing so, and what you're about to witness is a part of that process. And of course, I do want to mention that wherever it is that you are watching from, feel free to interact in the chat, and I will do my best to interact with you all back and answer any questions and keep this fully interactive. I am very grateful that you chose to come in and spend your time with me. So I'm hoping to make it worth it for y'all. So go ahead and interact, and I will do the best that I can to get to all of the stuffs. Right away, I do want to say hello to Kayleen and Black Crystal, who are already here in the chats. Welcome and blessed be. All right, so the specific radical theology that I'm going to be talking about today is called emancipation theology, and it's specifically new millennium perspectives for the Wiccan faith, specifically based on observations from an indigo child. Already in this title, there are some keyed language or some charged up language. The emancipation, the new millennium, the Wiccan faith, and indigo child are all charged phrases that are meant to really signal the kind of person that is meant to participate in or be a part of this work. Emancipation theology is a theology, and it is meant to be something that is reconciled by people who are on a clergy path, who are participating in their clergyhood and are participating in their ministries. Emancipation theology is meant to be a lens by which you view all of the work that you do. A little bit of information about me. Graduated from high school in 2008, graduated from undergrad in 2012, graduated with my third degree priesthood in 2014 from Witch School and Corellian Educational Ministries, graduated with my master's degree in 2015, and I am currently in my doctoral program. And in that time, I've worked as a telemarketer, worked in retail, worked in library systems, worked as a sexual health educator, worked in hospitals and crisis services. I do still have an active ministry here in Buffalo. I've done work in addiction treatment centers, in inpatient and outpatient behavioral health. I've worked with the elderly. I've worked with teens and adolescents. I've worked with children and middle adulthood. And so a lot of the stuff that has been put into emancipation theology is based on my participation in many different aspects of life. Today, I'm going to talk about what emancipation theology is, how it's meant to be applied in ministry, who can do it, and some of the techniques that you can participate in if you want to be doing emancipation theology. I will be providing some critiques of liberation theology, which is a theology that was coined by Catholic priest Gustavo Gutierrez, and liberation theology does do a good deal to help Catholics recognize what they can be doing to help the disenfranchised. However, I have critiques of Christian dominionism, specifically Catholicism, and all of that of my own, as well as the way that liberation theology kind of continues to disempower the most disenfranchised in favor of giving power and authority to those who already have power. And then I will also offer some mythological or scriptural support for emancipation theology that comes from North and South America, Africa, as well as Asia. Again, this particular work is still being done. It's not completed yet. And so as I find more mythological and scriptural support from Australia and from Europe, I will add those as well. One of the things that I had to learn in undergoing this project of developing a theology to guide my own ministry, because I became a high priest before I entered this program. I had a master's degree to practice mental health counseling and therapy before I entered this program. And so there were some things, some thoughts, some observations that I had that predated the information I was getting in this education. So I did have to kind of backtrack and understand exactly how do you create a theology, and the steps to creating a theology involves identifying a problem, consulting historical recollections of the problem, historical perspectives of the problem, looking to myth and scripture for solutions as well as ways to identify the problem, formulating what's called a systemic doctrine, interacting apologetically with the problem, and applying applying what you have learned, applying the solutions that you have come up with, and the information that you get from your apologetic interactions, you then apply it to relevant life and ministry. So these are the steps to creating a theology as a format for guiding how you practice as a priest, a priestess, a priestess, a member of the clergyhood. For those of us who identify as witches, as Wiccans, as Druids, as pagans, as polytheists, the idea of us having a theology is kind of foreign to the larger theological and larger spiritual academic fields. The academic fields are largely dominated by Christian theology, by Christian dominated perspectives. And so to create a theology that functioned specifically for Wiccans, specifically for Corellians, specifically for pagans, was a task that I didn't really have much resource or foundation for. Like, I really had to go back to the anthropological works of Fraser, and other and Gimbutas and other anthropologists and archaeologists who did a lot of work to unearth and to illuminate the ancient origins of polytheism. And so after having done that, I was able to come up with a problem statement that a theology was meant to resolve. I was able to recognize the problem across history. I was able to recognize and identify where the problem showed up in myth and scripture and where God created a prescription for it, or where elders or ancestors created a prescription for it. That the formulating a systemic doctrine is really combining mythological context and historical context in the addition of reason and science, that will allow us to not only recognize the problem, but also recognize what it is that we want to do whenever the problem arises. The apologetic interaction is when the systemic doctrine that has been created is integrated and will be utilized to empower the believers. It will be utilized to actually implement what the theology said it's supposed to implement. And then following that, once all that is said and done and the appropriate model is in place and is substantiated by research and it is reliable and replicable, you apply it to your ministry over and over and over again, and it can become a manualized thing, a manualized theology. There are some definitions that I would like to go over with everybody to kind of help get you in line with what it is that we're actually talking about here. So these definitions for the words hegemony, theology, emancipation, hermeneutic, pluralism, inclusivism, exclusivism, appropriation, sexism, racism, ableism, ageism, misogyny, queer, womanism, and patriarchy. These terms are all essential to understand if you're going to understand what the purpose of emancipation theology is. So right away at the top of the list, we have hegemony, which is leadership or dominance that is especially by one country or social group or group of people over the others. So an example of hegemony would be if the rich and the elite got to make all of the laws. An example of hegemony is if only the men get to make the laws. An example of hegemony would be if only rich men got to make the laws. Theology is the study of the nature of God and religious belief. Very straightforward. Emancipation is the the act or process of being set free from legal, social, or political restrictions. It literally means liberation. And there's a reason why I chose emancipation theology as opposed to some other synonym for liberation. Next term, hermeneutic. This is a method or theory of interpretation. The phrase kairos or kairos moment is an ancient Greek word meaning the right, critical, or opportune moment. And so, for example, the kairos moment for you to ask your beloved out on a date, like that is how you apply that phrase. What is the perfect moment to do the right thing? The term pluralism, specifically religious pluralism, is the state of being where every individual in a religiously diverse society has the rights, freedoms, and safety to worship or not worship according to their own conscience. Next phrase, inclusivism, is one of several approaches to understanding the relationship between religions and asserts that many different sets or beliefs are true. Exclusivism asserts that only one way is true and all others are in error. Appropriation is the action of taking something for one's own use, typically without the owner's permission. And in pop culture, we hear the phrase cultural appropriation a lot of times. And in cultural appropriation, what happens is something is taken from the owner and used to like maybe make money or make fame. But when it was in its original context, when it was with its original owners, that same thing was the source of embarrassment or criminality or ridicule. Sexism is prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination, typically against women on the basis of sex, and the belief that different sexes possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Racism is the prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. The belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to another. Ableism is discrimination in favor of able-bodied people. Ageism refers to the stereotypes and how we think, or our prejudices and how we feel, and discrimination in how we act towards others or our own selves based on age. Misogyny is the disliked or contempt for or ingrained prejudice against women. Queer, the term queer, specifically the counterpart of heterosexual, existing outside the boundaries of heteronormative expectation. Womanism and womanist theology is a methodological approach to theology which centers the experiences and perspectives of Black women, particularly African American women. Patriarchy is a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. And so specifically, emancipation theology, as it is designed, is meant to address, dismantle, and maybe put to rest or bury permanently ideas related to exclusivism, appropriation, sexism, racism, ableism, misogyny, homophobia, queerphobia, anti-Blackness, and it's meant to put a decent rest to the idea of patriarchy in favor of a more collaborative approach to society, to faith, and to understanding each other and getting along. Oh, hey, I'm back. I call Christianity, Judaism, Islam, the Judeo-Abrahamic faiths, like I call all of those the old age religion, even though I know that many of us are either, like in the case of Ifa, practicing a living tradition that is, listen, not even relevant to the Judeo-Christian understanding of things. And I know that many of us are reclaiming and reconstructing spiritualities that are older than this rendition of Christianity that is being force-fed down our throats, and that is being used to dominionize us or dominate us. But I do refer to that as like old age religion. And I do refer to the faith that is represented by this Congress as like the New Age, specifically like the Age of Aquarius. That's just like the terminology that I use. But the old age religion specifically Christianity and Judaism and Islam, were used to justify both slavery and racism. They were used to justify rape and ownership of women and non-males and non-white people. It was utilized to perpetuate violence and hegemonic political interests. Old age religion was utilized to coerce religious conversion. It was utilized to justify withholding resources necessary for living and thriving. You're not a Christian, you're not Jewish, you're not Muslim, then you're not getting food. You are getting ostracized when you shop at the markets. Citizens who are of these state-sanctioned faiths will get to do violence on your body just because you're here. Old age faiths are absolutely related to traumatic stress disorders, especially if you consider how many people are coming forward and saying that their priests, their pastors, their religious leaders were getting away with sexual indiscretions or financial indiscretions, or they were using their place in their clergy order to try to sway political movements. All of those things are things that occurred in the Christian dominion view of the world. This resulted in depressive disorders from people, anxiety disorders from people, people disassociating and not wanting to even be a part of the world, addictions, over medication, bias in research and reasoning. The entire field of psychology has very many, well, maybe not very many, but there are multiple diagnoses in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders that include magical thinking and certain kind of beliefs as indicators or warning signs of certain kind of disorders. That's the impact of the old age religion of Christianity, is that you can't be yourself, love who you want to love, be the color of your own skin, be the sex that you were born with, without folks perpetuating violence or some kind of ownership over your body. That's what the old age religion, that's what Christian dominionism has left us. Slavery, racism, rape, hegemonic violence, forced religious conversion, withholding resources, traumatic stress, and mental disorder. What are our responses to these things? Well, for those of us who are on a path of clergy and who are on a path of deep study, we might recognize that some of the perspectives of our faith automatically or regularly or just as a regular natural function kind of heal some of the things that were associated here, right? Our charge of the goddess and our charge of the god as co-creational, collaborative, and equitable documents really does do a lot to help us move beyond the understanding of patriarchy and into a place of collaborative, unified leadership, unified decision making and existence. Many earth-based spiritualities, and I know Corellianism specifically, is an animistic faith, which means that we personify nature and we give nature and everything that exists, we give it its proper space and we give it its proper honor as being a reflection of divinity or as being an emanation of divinity. And our ability to see everything as God really does impact how we treat the world. Our understanding of the immanent and transcendent nature of divinity, the hermetic principle of correspondence, the web of life, the wheel of the year, our use of magic, our clergyhoods, our understandings of karma, the law of threefold return, and the wicked reed are all natural remedies or kind of encoded remedies that can abate the ills that are brought forth by patriarchal hegemony. Emancipation theology is meant to be an applied Wiccan theology, meaning it is something that you do. It is related to how you live. It is related to how you pray. It is related to how you help other people using your ministry. Specifically speaking, applied Wiccan theology means that there is a behavior that is attached to all of our doctrines. This behavior is based on the action of the gods as the main source and justification and encouragement for our actions. This is how God solved the problem. These are the possibilities laid out for us by what God has done. This is why I am making the choice that I make. Additionally, my ongoing observations about pain and suffering in a world that is growing smaller due to technology and globalization means that our theology has to address the impact of globalization on the world. Globalization has made the world smaller and has increased individual access to expanding and pluralistic perspectives. It also gives individualized access to the level of suffering that continues to exist, not only in our own neighborhoods and our own communities, but also globally. So simply put, globalization gives us multiple ways to view our collective human problems and various ways to address them. It is also observed that the current way the world functions at large, i.e., hegemonic and patriarchal, maintains the suffering of the world on individual, group, and planetary levels. Hegemonic patriarchy is bad for the world, for individuals, for groups, and for the entire planet. And this particular idea of emancipation theology is formulated to address the issue of suffering at each of these levels. It's formulated to address individual suffering, group suffering, and address what we can do to heal the planet and usher into a place of renewal and the right use of energy and resources. Emancipation theology, as a radical theology, does view violence in particular as an aspect of our collective human shadow. There are some that say that violence is never the answer, but when it is the only answer. But how can the problem of violence be resolved when one of the participants are willing to remove, when none of the participants are willing to remove violence as an option? When everyone reserves the right to utilize violence as a resort, even as a last resort, it remains something that is the thing to do. Tried everything else, might as well use violence. And there are things that we can point to right now, from the ancient days to the more postmodern days, all across history, that demonstrates our collective human desire to participate in violence. The legend of Horus of Behutet, the Stanford prison experiment, the Holocaust, the Crusades, the historic rise and fall of empires, intimate partner violence, all of these points to evidence that violence is a part of our collective human shadow. And emancipation theology absolutely is formulated to help us address that and find ways to maybe extinct that out of our society, out of our culture. When it comes to the functionality, Emancipation theology seeks to resolve the fundamental question, what purpose does spirituality serve humanity? And to do this metaphysically, we cannot use empiricism or observation alone or only reason. This theology is considered an applied theology because it is meant to be done or practiced at various levels, and it draws upon our ancient maxim, as above, so below, as well as other philosophical discussions that can be found in the Kabbalion. The Kabbalion was one of the source materials used to develop emancipation theology. Um, it is a comparative and integrative theology. It's not specifically a theology of religion. It does address issues of spiritual hegemony, and it does compare and integrate different kinds of theologies. It is very pluralistic. So it draws on mythology, it draws on philosophy, it draws on morality, it draws on spiritual interpretations from varying perspectives. It includes intercontinental and cultural perspectives. And this is all done to help broaden the scope of the spiritual vastness, as well as illuminate any additional possibilities for greater interaction with spirit and with our environment. Emancipation theology also addresses the lingering egocentrism that still hinders all of humanity, not just one particular group. It definitely decolonizes, destigmatizes, and depathologizes all magical faiths because it encourages us to recognize that magical thinking in and of itself is not a symptom, and that people with varying religious faiths or spiritual leanings will have magical thinking. Emancipation theology specifically utilizes Wiccan faith to address the toxic aspects of patriarchy, specifically heterosexism, racism, and sexism and misogyny. It produces a model for new millennium clergy to follow to aid in the healing from the historical abuses from the old age religions. So it does use or it recognizes the 3-degree system of Wiccan clergy, and it exemplifies ways to participate in emancipation theology from 1st degree, 2nd degree, or 3rd degree levels. It does utilize various aspects of Wiccan theology, liturgy, mythologies to demonstrate the possibilities for its application. And it does utilize previously bastardized occult concepts to illuminate New Age possibilities. So if you recognize that a lot of the stuff that occultists, that witches, that midwives, that high clergyhood believed back in the day, if you see it starting to make a reemergence in the scientific fields, and you're like, yo, that's kind of bullshit. Witches and magical people and occultists have been saying this for centuries. If you see this stuff starting to spring up in the academic and educational world, emancipation theology is absolutely designed to continue to utilize the technologies that we've always had faith in, that we've always put stock in, that we've always observed to be helpful and to work. We continue to use those, and we continue to exemplify their expert use and their expert functionality. We do have some pillars for emancipation theology. There is a right way to do it, and there is a way to attempt to do it where you're not actually doing it at all, right? There's a right way to do algebra, and there's a way where you're I don't know what you're doing, but that's not algebra. There's a right way to do trigonometry. There's a right way to do psychology. There's a right way to do a bunch of things. And this is true with emancipation theology as well. And it starts with these pillars. Emancipation theology is spiritually sound, and it utilizes specifically, but not exclusively, the occult maxim, as above, so below. And it's used to conceptualize the 3 levels of clergy members and actually how you do emancipation theology. So, for example, as above, so below, as applied to the governmental level, to the institutional level, or the corporate level, and then the individual level. So, as above, so below. What does this mean for how governments ought to be acting and behaving for the betterment of all? How should corporations be acting and behaving, and how should individuals be acting and behaving? And aside from that, that's the as above part. The so below part is, what do we expect to see happen as a result of these behaviors or these changes or addressing certain concerns? Second pillar, emancipation theology draws on common aspects of pagan, Wiccan, and occult philosophy, science, and behavior. And it does this to produce a model of action for Aquarian age clergy. And we look at things like the Wheel of the Year, the Web of Life, the 3-degree systems of initiation as like an organizational kind of thing. And we take a look at these things as a way of helping outline what it is we are going to do to help. We are not seeking to be the same hypocrites from the old age religion. We are not seeking to be the same abusers from old age religion. We are not seeking to be the same old dominators of old age religion. And so, since we know all of the things that we are not going to do, emancipation theology helps us discuss the things that we are going to do, so that emancipation theologists are better able to not only identify themselves in the positive based on who they are, but also based on what they do, how they can help, and what they expect to be the outcome of their interventions. Emancipation theology does draw on ethnically, sexually, and gender diverse approaches to understanding spirit. And we do this as a way of accounting for those who have been historically marginalized and disenfranchised. We recognize that God is Black. We recognize that God is queer or gay or lesbian or transgender or intersex. We recommend that God might have many genital things or no genital things. We recognize that some of the ways that we view God is based on our own limitation and our own bias. We understand that God is a woman. We understand that God can be confrontational and nonviolent. We understand that God can be everything and nothing at the same time. And one of the things that emancipation theology seeks to do is to remove all of the human created limitations on the idea of God, so that everyone and everything can be restored to its rightful place in divinity. Right here, where we talk about Black theology, queer theology, womanist theology, this is where that idea of hermeneutic, the one of the phrases that I talked about earlier, comes into play. So when it comes to the idea of hermeneutic, and again, that is a phrase that literally just means a method or theory of interpretation. When it comes to Black theology, the hermeneutic or the theory of interpretation from pagan, polytheistic, Wiccan, New Age might come from the places of voodoo and hoodoo and their historical journey and battle for freedom and free religious practice. When it comes to the idea of using education, Black theology might center on the idea that the island of Haiti is the first nation in North America in the Western Hemisphere to get its freedom from imperial or colonial powers. The island of Haiti was the first to beat the French and get their independence from colonial rule. When it comes to Black theology, looking at hoodoo as a system of healing in affirmation and medicine for Black communities is regularly recognized. Some folks call hoodoo a mixed baby, born on the North American continent, specifically in the United States. And it is a magical, spiritual, and healthcare practice. It's not a specific faith, but understanding the techniques of voodoo, understanding where these things came from and how the factors that led to these very prolific spiritualities surviving and thriving, looking into that will help us understand how to fortify ourselves in the current moment. Interestingly enough, hoodoo and voodoo as Black theologies do not carry the same fear of the establishment that maybe faiths that are of the Caucasian persuasion have, right? So to put it bluntly, Caucasian and white practitioners of polytheistic and magical faiths act really, really scared of the Caucasian and white patriarchal overlords. However, hoodoo and voodoo in general are 100% rebellion. And if you want to be free, you are going to have to rebel, especially when the forces that be continue to deny you the life, liberty, happiness, property that is guaranteed you. Queer theologies and adopting a hermeneutic of queerness might lead you to recognize that everybody, who we are, is a gift from the gods. And even though folks in our society and our community might place strife and stress and trauma upon our bodies, those are our oppressors. Those are not our gods. A hermeneutic that is slanted towards queer affirmation will always recognize and demonstrate the queerness that is inherent in divinity by reflecting the idea of queer gods, gods that shapeshift, gods that are understood to be men or male who become women or female and then become impregnated and give birth, are examples of ways that you can leverage scripture and myth to demonstrate the divinity of queerness. And then the same thing for womanist theology, where we are seeking to uphold, uplift, and support our Black women as people who have been historically ruthlessly marginalized and disenfranchised by our current North American, specifically United States society. Even in the spiritual realm, where women, where females, where femme-presenting people represent the highest mysteries that our universe has to offer, even in our current realm of existence in this Judeo-Christian Abrahamic faith, even our sacred women of all ethnicities, of all presentations, of all genders are met with embarrassment, are met with shame, are forced to reckon with irrational guilt for things that have nothing to do with them. So womanist theology specifically identifies and recognizes that Black women have historically had the shittiest end of the stick in society and seeks to rectify that. So if you think Patrick and Sambo and Hans and Jungtung, who do not know the difference between monarchy and a republic, who cannot read the Declaration of Independence, or who can't read Webster's spelling book. Imagine these people making laws for Susan B. Anthony or Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Um, that's one of the problems of like these people who do not understand the nature of the plight for black women, for black queers. Like they still making laws for black women's and black queers. And emancipation theology contributes a way to add equity into our system of government. It is a way to add equity into our system of existence so that folks are being represented by themselves and not by people who are strangers or who um, do not have your best interest at heart. And like, dare I say, current representation doesn't have any of our best interests at heart. Why do we need to understand womanism as opposed to a general universal feminism? Well, unfortunately, some of the progenitors and celebrated ancestors of feminism, like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they often blamed immigrants for their setbacks. And in order to win crucial support, Susan B. Anthony and other white suffragists sold Southerners on the idea that the votes of highly educated women, mostly white women, of course, would guarantee the future of white supremacy. So that's right. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they broke with the ranks of other marginalized communities and appealed to white supremacists and said, hey, if you give women, white women, the right to vote, our vote will be added to the vote of white men and it will drown out all the other cries and concerns of other people. And so that is the story. That is like, you don't even have to take my word for it. You can research some of the things that Susan B. Anthony said and some of the things that Elizabeth Cady Stanton said and some of the interactions with some of these white suffragettes with their black counterparts and some of the things that they said and where they broke ranks. And so because the feminist movement saw fit to specifically exclude black women, there is the idea of womanist theology that is centered around black women. And it is essential because, again, according to emancipation theology, everyone has access to equity, even the least. Emancipation theology does have a glaring critique of other theologies. It has a glaring critique of the idea of original sin. It has a glaring critique of the idea of karma, and it discusses that both original sin and karma are both the same theology, and they both seek to help you understand why you are suffering right now today. It has stuff to do with maybe things that you didn't even do in this life, things you don't even remember doing. And both karma and original sin function as a type of social control to get the public to do whatever the elite want or whatever the spiritual elite want. And so, for those who might not understand or recognize, the idea of karma and reincarnation was used to uphold the class or caste system in India, in which there were people who were deemed to be better or gooder or more valuable than others. And that class system had a group of people called the untouchables who had no hope of safety or salvation or good karma. And so those people were largely abused and taken advantage of and marginalized. And so the idea of karma and the idea of original sin, they function the same way when you add it to the state or the government. And emancipation theology actually doesn't have any time for ideas or concepts that brand humanity as evil, as unworthy, as unnecessary, or as anything other than divine right from its onset. The Hermetic principles are figured largely into emancipation theology. As I've said before, it draws on our maxim, as above, so below, as the universe, so the soul, as without, so within, to model the various levels that you can do emancipation theology on. So you can do emancipation theology on a government or institutional level. You can do it on a group or organization or a corporate level, and you can do it one-on-one with an individual. And it is meant to be applied and utilized on all of those levels, either simultaneously or as separate interventions or practices. When I said that emancipation theology is something that you do, I absolutely meant it. And so I formulated or utilized our Wheel of the Year as an action schedule. And so if anyone is interested in learning more about emancipation theology and how you do it, one of the things that you can look to is our Wheel of the Year. And the theology of the wheel encourages mental and emotional stability by encouraging frequent reflections on gratitude, difficulty, triumph, struggle, and resiliency. And these are all evidenced in nature, all of these qualities. And so with the help of the energies that are associated with each of these holidays, or the major themes that are associated with each holidays, a clergy member who was doing emancipation theology could build any holiday service, any full moon service, any new moon service, any feast day into an opportunity to help empower people to free themselves from the aspects of their lives or their functioning or society that is keeping them limited. When I say that the ideas and the practices and the techniques are supported mythologically, I did take a look at Aradia, I took a look at the Descent of Inanna, and I took a look at the Four Sons, as well as several other mythologies. Like, this is just a brief list to get the conversation started. But there are myths upon myths upon myths that discuss either God sending their child down to help guide and help refocus humanity. There are stories about God making sacrifices of themselves to better the plight of others. There are stories about natural destruction and renewal. There are stories about human heroes who save the day. There are stories about animal heroes who save the day and who help lead down a path of freedom. Because at the end of the day, emancipation theology 100% is about the path of freedom. And I have always associated my Corellian faith with freedom because of all of the things that I get to do, learn, practice, experience by being open to this faith. Maybe one of the most important things to know or recognize is what are the techniques of emancipation theology. And of course, there's the prayers for individuals and groups. There's doing the chanting and the candle burning and the incense. The thoughts and prayers and aligning your will with the divine will is absolutely a technique of emancipation theology. Teaching spiritual concepts to others, teaching people about being the warrior, and teaching people about how when doing hard things absolutely are a component of good karma or justified karma. And when I talk about that, a lot of times I refer to the story in the Bhagavad Gita about Arjuna, who like literally has to go to battle against his cousin because his cousin is kind of like a tyrant and is doing bad things. And so while Arjuna does not want to participate in violence or battle against his cousin, does not want to have to destroy anyone. If he doesn't do it, his karma, Arjuna's karma, is going to suffer because he failed to do something good when he had the ability to do so. So just being passive and complacent is not a good way to generate good karma. Being passive and complacent is not a good way to work off any of the karma that you have already sustained. And so teaching spiritual concepts like that is a part of emancipation theology. Of course, referencing mythology, spiritual self-disclosure. So talking about times where we've had to do hard things for great reasons, using confrontation and reminding people that using scripture or using mythology to hurt people is actually not godly. And engaging confrontationally with that and against that is a part of emancipation theology. Doing spiritual assessments, guided meditations like past life and future life regressions, laying on of hands like Reiki and anointing and hot hands are part of emancipation theology. And practices that have been bastardized or demonized by voices outside of our faith, by voices outside of our practice, is going to be a form of doing emancipation theology. Using communities. So not just having covens or temples or circles or groves, but using public space as you are entitled to is a part of emancipation theology. Letting people see you and know that you are here and what you have to offer is a part of this. Encouraging prayer, encouraging shadow work, meditation on God forms, and memorizing myths are all techniques that are done. So is participating in demonstrations, organizing marches and demonstrations, handing out waters, doing things that support counterculture, that support equity, and that give that flair of holding the powers that be accountable for our lives. Like all of that is encapsulated in this emancipation theology. The role of clergy is pretty prolific. Emancipation theology does take the idea of the three-tiered system of first, second, and third degree, with your elders or what have you included, and it assigns ways of participating. So one, initiated clergy who claim to come to this path to help others achieve peace and reconciliation from the trials and tribulations of life have a responsibility to the community of magical faith. So whether we identify as Wicca, as priestess or priest, as a Santero or a Mambo, when we take oaths of clergy, we take into ourselves the responsibility of caring for and nurturing a community. And we take this oath seriously by participating in the healing process for ourselves. So we might want to help people get better, but we're not going to do that until we ourselves are whole. So before we attempt to do the work for anybody else or with others, we make sure that we are legit. You can use part of your first degree training to help folks identify attachment types in various mythologies and helping them to identify solutions or ways of being that can help set the stage for folks who wish to continue this work. Second degree students can utilize their evolving understanding of attachment and families and apply them to their own families and karmic attachment styles as a way of deepening their own shadow work and healing. And third degree students can explore the various ways attachment styles and attachment injuries impact the web of life and become aware of the various ways people, magical and non-magical alike, act towards each other when they are hurt deeply by those who love them and by those that they love. Coven heads, elders, policymakers can utilize the results of their work in this area to design programs for healing, outreach, and other types of events that further the work for healing, disentanglement, and reconciliation. And this allows for people and communities and organizations to flow easily together, unencumbered by pain and suffering. So if we understand that hurt people, we can reasonably expect that healed people will heal people. And that is the role of clergy, healing yourself and helping people become empowered to heal themselves. Emancipation theology is not currently one, finished, or two, manualized. However, once it is completed in its entirety, you can come to expect a thorough introduction to this idea, ways to have an emancipating identity. There will be some more talk and discussion about how to emancipate your sex and your relationships, your health and your healthcare, how to emancipate institutions, groups, and individuals so that the work that is being done, the emancipation work that is being done, the empowering other people to live rich, full, meaningful lives outside of the demands of oppressive forces. That's what it is at the end of the day. That's what we working towards in emancipation theology. So that's it for now. I do hope that you will continue on and watch a bunch of the other presentations and lectures that are a part of this World Congress. Let's see, in the chat, Magical Mermaid, yes, doctrine versus dogma. That is one of the things that I contemplated very heavily when I was designing this. And I will say that a lot of other theologies, even Black theology, queer theology, womanist theology, like a lot of them are very dogma based. And I think that that might have a lot to do with the dominionism that produced those ideas. I do want to go ahead and say hello to Swag Fan. Hope you're doing pretty well. And of course, thank you to everyone in the chat. Kayleen, I think as Druid John Beckett recently wrote, my love of nature is why I have a pagan theology. Yeah, nature for sure. Oh, Kayleen, you want to see the final dissertation? Well, as soon as it's done, as soon as I get my PhD and I get my my diploma, my advisor has been calling it my receipt, which has been it's been feeling pretty invalidating. But once it's all done, I will definitely be doing a lot more with it and introducing it a lot more fully to the Corellian tradition and anyone else who might be interested in utilizing a theology to help them like save the world, like for real. Thank you, Lord Don, for being here with me. Thank you, Black Crystal 615, for being here and being in the chats. I love you all so very much. Please stick around for other offerings from this Pagan World Congress. Have your conversations open and expand your minds. That's what it's all for. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down for the night. Blessed be, and I will see y'all around as I pop in and out of the offerings that are happening for this event. I do want to uplift my elders. So again, yes, I am the first priest of the Corellian tradition. I am succeeding the Most Reverend Donald Lewis, and I do want to uplift him as one of the hosts for this event. I do want to uplift Reverend Mary. I do want to uplift Reverend Ed as the people who are responsible for bringing us all together for these important conversations. Thank you, love you, and many blessings to you all, and I will see you over the course of this event. Thank you for being here. I hope you found this helpful and inspiring. You can reach out to me on Facebook, on email, all that jazz. But until next time, blessed be. Love you lots.